Office at James Madison University. And I was asked tonight to come in and spend a little bit of time to talk with you about how do colleges in general, how do we make decisions? So a lot of what I'll be sharing and going over tonight is not necessarily just JMU specific. It is actually how the process does work. Some other information will vary from university to university. And that's where we sort of have to put that responsibility back on the students and the parents that are prospectives to ask some of the questions. So tonight I want to just kind of highlight the process and give you an idea of some questions that are actually acceptable and good questions to ask of us as admissions representatives. One size does not fit all. As you know, there are a number of different colleges and universities, both in-state and out-of-state, and we're all sort of different in size. But there is some common themes in terms of what we look at in terms of the admissions process. And if you notice up here, one of the major things that you see that pops up first is the academic program of study. Does anyone, or can anyone sort of shout out at me? What do they think what do you think we're sort of focusing on when we're referring to the academic program of study? Without kind of already sort of seeing what's up there, maybe expanding on that a little bit. Anybody? No? No takers? Yes.
Is it what classes you've taken?
Exactly. What classes you've taken throughout high school, and mainly focusing on the core courses as I've highlighted here. And when we talk about the cores, we're of course talking about English, social science, lab science, math, and foreign language throughout high school. So what you don't typically, or what you really don't see here are what? Some of you don't see the electives. While those things are important and we do value that in the fact that the students have stepped outside of the cores and explored some things, it's been our knowledge and from our history that the best indicator for us in terms of the admissions process, in terms of how prepared a student's going to be and successful when they get to our colleges and universities, is by focusing on these core areas. So many of us do spend a lot of time focusing on these areas throughout high school, and for some of you as early as middle school. I'm a mother of a 9th grader this year, and she actually started taking some of her foreign language and actually her math sequence in middle school. So we will actually go back as far as middle school, and then we also go and we look at the senior year as well. So we do include the senior year course schedule. Courses of rigor are also very important. We'll be looking at honors level courses, AP, if you had a pre-IB program. I know some of the schools across the state, high schools have the pre-IB and IB programs. Dual enrollment, all of these areas, these types of courses are very important in the admissions decision. The next area we're going to focus on is going to be grades. Grades do matter, okay? And even through the senior year. I always like to stress that with students because sometimes senioritis kicks in and sometimes seniors figure, okay, I can slack off a little bit. But many of the colleges and universities will look at mid-year grades. We will ask for mid-year grades. For those of us that have early admissions or early decision processes, we'll ask for mid-year grades prior to even making a final decision. There will be a preliminary decision that sometimes is made, but then we'll go back and double check those decisions based on mid-year senior grades and as well at the end of the year. With the grades, we're looking in the core classes only. Once again, focusing on those core classes that I highlighted in the previous slide. And something that I think is important for students and parents to understand is the trends. It's not always necessarily looking to see all these A's and B's, but we understand that there are going to be some upwards and downwards throughout the transcript. So we do actually take a look at and take the time to look at those grades. Now there's all kinds of tiering of grades. There's a combination of A's and B's in those core classes. There's combinations of just B's. And sometimes it could be a combination of B's and C's. But of course we prefer not to see as many B's and C combinations. But we recognize by looking at those AP classes and looking at those dual enrollment classes, for example, if I've got a student or we've got a student that is a not so strong in math, but they throughout high school have continued to press along to the point where they've gone and gotten a math honors level or AP level statistics course that they're trying out this year. They may get a C in that course, but that's okay because that student is going to be better prepared when they go on to our campuses and have to actually take pre-calculus or calculus. The next area that we focus on is the standardized test area. The tests are very important. That's the good old SATs and ACTs. Any juniors here? Do I have any juniors or sophomores? Okay, great. It's very recommended that students that are in the junior year prepare to take the test in the spring of their junior year. Reason being, by that time you've taken Algebra 2, and on the SAT in particularly, there's a lot of questions that are geared towards Algebra 2. So that way you kind of know that it's still fresh in your mind. You've probably just finished taking Algebra 2, and the likelihood of you doing better in the math section would be greater. Then you should take it again your senior year, of course. We don't recommend, or it's not recommended, highly recommended that you take the test more than, I would say, 3 times. And even 3 is a little bit excessive. If you don't get the score you want, they will always, especially with the SATs, they will mix and match. Most colleges and universities will mix and match the highest combined score of the math and the critical reasoning. And that's for the SAT. The ACT, I'm not too sure on, but Mr. Johnson could probably answer that question. But the major thing to sort of point out with the SATs is that it's a test that is used by the admissions representatives at many of the colleges and universities, as well as the ACT. That both tests are slightly designed differently, and what I recommend, or what we recommend many of you to do, is if you have your schools that you're targeting, ask those schools what their preference is. Some of them may have more of a preference for an SAT versus the ACT, but that's a fair question to be able to ask. Each college or university is going to be a little bit different. Letters of recommendation. I just actually got this question while I was out in the hall at my table about the letter of recommendation. Many of the colleges now will ask for no more than 2 to 3. I know in the past we've had situations where we would receive anywhere from 7 to 33 letters of recommendation for one applicant. So you can imagine what that looked like. And to be quite honest, by the time the second or third one got to us, we didn't even read the other 30, honestly. This process, the committee is so structured, and a lot of times by the time we start to get those letters of recommendation, the committee is so far into the process that the letters of recommendation just don't even make it into the application. So it's best, what I recommend, or what many of the admissions representatives will recommend, is that you stick to one and make sure that you get with a person or pick a person that's going to be your reference that knows you. Nothing is more sort of embarrassing when we're sitting in committee and we are going over a student's application, and then the first thing the line says is, well, Johnny Smith is a great student of a friend of my dad's that, and it just doesn't tell us anything about Johnny Smith. So please do choose someone in terms of a reference that knows you, can speak of you, can speak of the student and their work ethic. It's more of them telling or showing us who they are versus telling us what they are. For example, I actually was told this example today. There was a reference that wrote in for one of our applicants, or two applicants. And one of the applicants, the reference person said that John is a hard worker, great musician, and studies well. Then the next applicant that we reviewed the applicant, the same reference went into more detail about that applicant with regards to them working to pull together a food bank and organizing and how that activity, how the student was very involved. Those are the types of people you want to be your reference. Someone that actually knows your work ethic and can speak positively of you and your abilities and your skills. It doesn't necessarily have to be a guidance counselor. It doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher. It could actually even be an employer or someone that is in your community. As long as they can speak positively and give us better insight into who you are and what your work ethic is like. Extracurricular activities. These are some of the standard things that we sort of get. I'm so involved, I'm so amazing. We really want to know a little bit more. We want to know more about you. What makes you who you are? What makes you stand out? What are some things that ultimately, if you're put up against another candidate or another applicant, what do you have to offer that applicant may not have? So sort of stepping outside the box. We're not so much concerned about the number of activities that you're involved in. We're more concerned about the quality. Once again, that's going back to that, show us and don't tell us. We'd rather you show us who you are than tell us who you are. Same type of thing with the essays. Just kind of trying to stay away from any type of instant messaging lingo. When you're writing, you want to make sure you proofread your essays as much as possible. Telling us something outside of what the application is already telling us. For many of the colleges and universities, the first thing that an essay might say that kind of pushes an applicant to the side, not to say they don't get admitted, but kind of just, it kind of turns the admissions representatives off is when they sort of gloat about coming to our campuses and knowing that our campus was very nicely manicured. Well, we're all doing that because we want to make sure that we are impressing our prospective students as well as our current students. But what we want in this personal statement is to see something about you beyond just what is in the application. So you want to take steps with this personal statement to really step outside the box, make sure you proofread it. And another good tip is to kind of match your personal statement up with the type of school that you're applying to. So for example, if you're applying to Harvard versus Princeton, those are two very different schools. So spend some extra time going to the website and really learning about what makes Harvard special, and then sort of tailoring your personal statement to that quality of that university. That shows that you've taken the time and initiative to sort of go that extra mile. Oftentimes students will say, well, I'm just going to use the same essay for all the schools. But we're all different. So you may want to just, like I said, take that extra step and really find out by going to the websites, visiting on campus, and finding out what really makes that university stand out, and then sort of tailoring it within your essay to how you feel you can make an impact if you were admitted to that university. So, sort of to kind of summarize all of that I sort of quickly went through, I hope I wasn't too fast, but this is really the essence of what this whole process looks like in terms of what the decision and how you go about making the decision. Now, many of the universities you might ask, and they will say that the priority, the order that you see here is not their priority. They may put the testing scores above the curriculum. But that's where it really is your responsibility and kind of putting the ownership back on you as the student to reach out and seek that information. Seek your admissions representative to find out really what that particular university's, what really stands out to be their most important criteria that you see here. But in general, we're all going to be looking at the curriculum and seeing how strong the curriculum has been for the student throughout high school, and this is each applicant. And know that no one person in this process is making the decision on the applicant. We all serve and sort of work in a committee and with a group of people to make these decisions, the final decisions. Most times the applications are looked at least once or twice before a final decision is even made. Another thing to highlight with the recommendation letter to be cognizant of is that oftentimes these recommendation letters are used for scholarship purposes with many universities. So that's yet another reason to make sure that the essay is very well written, and you've done a good job of making sure that you focused in on how you were promoting yourself with that essay. Because there are a lot of scholarship opportunities within universities where the actual application will be used, and what they will ask, the departments will ask that the essays be forwarded so the applicants can be considered for departmental scholarship opportunities. So you may want to also keep that in mind. The line that you see here, all the things above that line, those are standard criteria that are a part of the decision process. The things that you see below that are items that we basically consider tiebreakers. So everybody's going to be evaluated based on curriculum, grades, SATs, ACT scores. Then anything below that is going to be considered, something that we'll use as a tiebreaker of one applicant versus another. Many of us are not, and another thing with the grades, to kind of highlight one thing there as well that I neglected. We are aware of weighted GPAs, and we're also aware of any other weighted formulas. So there doesn't have to be a real concern as to whether or not a student is your child, or a student may not be getting fairly looked at because of their GPA. Because it is the responsibility of the admissions representatives to know what the GPA scale is for each individual high school that they're assigned to recruiting from. Okay? Just making some realistic goals and listings of schools. I think it's a great idea to first sort of start with the schools that you don't think you necessarily want to go to first. And then maybe, having a list, and also having the list of schools that you definitely know, you want to target. They're your shining star school. But try out those schools and visiting those schools, then you have something to compare to. Because if you go to that one school that you have your mind set on, you might miss something that another school might offer. So, you want to make sure you give yourself a fair chance to look at all the different options that you have. So I recommend to students to have a sort of a tier effect or tier list of schools. You want to have those schools that you really, really love, you like it, you know what stands out for you. Then you have a list of schools that, I maybe could consider these. And maybe start with those first, because you already know what that school, how that one school has sort of won you over. But just in case you need a backup, you may need to seek out other options and other opportunities. I also think that it's a very good idea to don't discount the community colleges, because they are also a very good, viable option to get into the four-year institutions of your choice. And they're also a little bit cheaper, or actually quite a bit cheaper. Deadlines. I cannot stress this enough. Deadlines are so important. Admissions deadlines are important. Financial aid deadline dates. I think there's going to be a session on financial aid here tonight, and I'm pretty sure they're going to stress how important it is to adhere to the deadline date. For many of the in-state schools here in Virginia, there is a priority filing date for the FAFSA. That date, in most cases, is March the 1st for many of the universities and colleges in Virginia. And that date is very important because if you wait till March the 2nd, you run the risk of losing out on whatever aid you may have been eligible for. And every year, it never fails, we have students that will come and, I actually had a student this year, for example, that came and was ready to go pack her bags and was headed to JMU in August, and she couldn't come because she got the final bill and was not able to afford it because she waited till March the 2nd to file her FAFSA. And she found out that it was going to cost her about $11,000 more than what she thought. Which she could have gotten aid if she had just adhered to the deadline. So please, 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 definitely check out all of the deadline dates for applications, as well as scholarship deadline dates, and FAFSA deadline dates. You want to send all the materials that are requested by the colleges and universities, and you want to make sure that it's done in a timely manner, because if it's not done in a timely manner, then what happens is it just sort of creates a ball effect with your application. So it's very, very important to make sure you go to the websites of the colleges and universities. There's a great booklet put out by ECMC, which is a loan organization in the state, for the state of Virginia, that actually highlights, and I'm pretty sure that the guidance office here has tons of them because they send them out. But it's a catalog, basically a brochure that highlights everything you need to know about every single state institution here within the state of Virginia. And it kind of gives you cost breakdown, all of our deadline dates, things of that nature. When you get mail, you want to read it and you want to respond to it. Don't just let your mail go to junk. Most colleges and universities these days are using email, communicating with students via email throughout the application process. There are very few paper applications floating around anymore, so please make sure that you respond to your email when you get your email. Students, I'd like to make a recommendation that you get an email address that is strictly for your college search process and maybe separated from your social email. Not to say that you didn't get admitted because of some of the email addresses that we've seen in the past, but you best believe the committee does sit back and sort of chuckle at some of them and build somewhat of an impression of an applicant based on some of the email addresses that we see. So it is recommended that you definitely maybe want to have a separate email address. And, leave the decision making to us. That's really what we're supposed to do. That's our job. And we're going to make the best decision for the student and the applicants or applications from the applications that we get. And so as we make those decisions, they will be done in a very effective as well as in a fair manner, because of the criteria that I've just highlighted here in terms of the priority. But really do step outside and ask admissions representatives those questions. Don't be afraid to ask, what is the success rate of your students after the first year? Those types of things you want to know, because that is going to tell you whether or not our students are still happy at their particular university. Okay?